highlight of many recent presentations, the Plucky Squire is nearly upon us, and we had a chance to sit down and play an incomplete version of the game on PC this past week. When I say we, though, I'm actually talking about my friend and colleague, Tom Morgan.
How's it going? Yes, I did.
Yes, it's good to have you on a video together. We actually finally played the same game together this time, and it's one I think we're both really excited for.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we had access to the PC version, so no console comparisons or anything like that. This is a very early preview sort of situation. Also, we were told we can only take on the first 4 chapters, which isn't totally spoilerific. It's still fairly close to what we've seen in like reveal trailers, and if you've seen those and how the game kind of twists and morphs the playstyle and the visuals, you'll kind of be on board with where we are now. But yeah, it's looking really good so far.
So just to lay it out for those that maybe aren't familiar with it, it's essentially a game where you play as the main character of a storybook, which is a series of books, actually. And the game begins sort of within the storybooks, and you control the Plucky Squire as a drawing. So it's basically designed to create this sort of like 2D aesthetic where you're looking at pictures within a book. It's all drawn with like sort of a marker-ish kind of like colored line look, but like they use like the material properties of Unreal to give the pages sort of that actual like physically based look. So like even though it is drawn, it really looks like it's drawn on a piece of paper and not just 2D art. And it begins sort of exploring almost Zelda-like, sort of a top-down view. You're walking around, you're talking to people. They do some cutscenes where they kind of zoom in and show the drawings up close. Has kind of a simple combat mechanic. And, you know, if you've seen the trailer, you kind of know where it's going. But even in the 2D section, they do some very creative things. There's like puzzle solving with like actually deleting words that are written on the text and then finding another word and dropping it into the sentence to change the layouts. There's a section where you face down a boss and it turns into sort of a Punch-Out style mini game. And there's a bunch of things like that, right? But I think the big thing here is when they jump out of the page. And the idea is that the villain, right at the beginning, is like, I'm tired of losing. I lose in every one of these books. I'm reading the book right now of the book that you're the main character in. And he uses his magic to expel you from the book. And when doing so, you end up out on the desk, in a desk in the real world. With like pencils, markers, there's headphones, just like, it's like an actual desk rendered in all of its glory. Kind of reminded me of the RTX Marbles at Night demo, but obviously without the ray tracing. And then it controls like a 3D platformer at that point. And it seems like in the game, you're going to kind of be transitioning in and out of the 2D storybook stuff, going into different storybooks and different pages, and then coming back out into the 3D world. So that's basically what we got to see so far. But in terms of the technology, I guess, we played it on PC. Why don't you sort of set the issue for us? I mean, so you played it on a 4080, right?
Yeah.
I played it on a 4090. And I think we both found the performance to be generally agreeable.
Yeah, I mean, it's overkill for our setups.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, RTX 4080 here, 4K epic settings across the board. You know, this is getting to like 300 FPS and 400 FPS in like, you know, you go to a kind of Mario style side scroller view at some points, and in those moments it's like 400, no problem whatsoever. So not a problem really. It is using Unreal Engine 4 or a variation of that rather than 5, so we're not expecting any kind of like crazy cutting edge Lumen features or anything.
I don't think it's actually needed either. That's the thing, right?
No. And also, obviously being such a kind of performant game, it will probably scale to consoles like Nintendo Switch pretty well. There's no PS4 or Xbox One last gen version announced, which is kind of surprising because there's a big install base on those machines and that probably would have done quite well. But it is just PS5, Series X, S, Switch, and PC, which is what we've got here.
I will say the only complaint I have is that I did notice on PC there is some almost expected at this point UE4 stutter. I would say it's minor compared to what we've seen in a lot of games, but when doing some of the transitional animations, like changing the pages in the book, you sometimes get these little hiccups, little stutters that are unfortunately very common in Unreal Engine games. Like I said, less severe than many other games, but it's still disappointing that we're still seeing this. And frankly, I just kind of expect it these days, sadly, when it comes to UE4 specifically. So it is still somewhat of an issue, and I hope that will not be an issue on the consoles. Probably not.
Probably not, from what we've seen, how those run. But it is a shame because this is kind of the Plucky Squire's main gimmick, right? It's like jump into those green swirling portals or flip the page in the 3D world, and that's like the ta-da moment. So it's a slight shame that that's dulled a little bit by the hitching, but there you go.
So I only had enough time to play up into the point where, so I think the first 40 minutes takes place in the book or so. And then you're expelled from the book, and that's when you begin sort of your adventure in 3D. And I sort of ran out of time at a certain point, so I only get to play about 10 minutes in the 3D space. So I'm wondering how far you actually took it and what we could expect.
Midway through chapter 4, which I think if you got past like the 3D bit and you saw the Plucky Squire, Jot is his name, jump out, then you kind of got a measure of what the general trajectory is of the game. Obviously, most of the game is played with that Zelda style view, top down. You go into a dungeon, then it's Mario style. But between those, there's obviously the, Super Punch-Out stuff. But also, which I don't think you did see, were other bits, like there's an archery minigame. And obviously, in the Super Punch-Out and archery bits, he gets his guns out and he's looking super muscly, and it's played for laughs. And there's another sort of JRPG-ish bit later on where you jump into a kind of Magic the Gathering style play card.
See, that's really cool, and that's kind of what I was hoping, because I think what surprised me the most is how much variety there is in this. Like, even up through that whole section, I already mentioned the Punch-Out thing, there's the Magic the Gathering card situation. They're like playing with different genres and genre rules, and the camera is constantly shifting, and you're just getting a different kind of feel and look at the game from all these different angles. So I really hope that they can keep this sort of variety going all the way through.
Me too, yeah. I mean, in terms of the visuals, the stuff that they are doing, it's nothing. I think it's more stylistic execution than being like at the cutting edge of anything.
Oh yeah, of course.
So you've got the 3D stuff, right, which comes along very early on, and it kind of turns all the character models into this kind of plasticine-like texture, and they're running around these environments where everything is, arts and crafts. There's buttons, there's paper clips, there's acrylic jars, and all the rest of it. And this is all like more realistically shaded, but I think it's very sort of telling that how they present the storybook itself. So it's got kind of that sort of more realistic lighting across it, where you can see the sheen, almost like a glossy sheen to the pages as they kind of bend over from the spine. And you can also see like the fiber texture of the page as well.
Of the paper, yep.
And then when you jump into it, it's like, okay, they remove all that and it becomes kind of a flattened plane. As it moves to 2D, and it kind of removes the obscurity or obscurance of all those effects to give it, put you perfectly in line with that. But they keep the fold in the middle. That's kind of kept so you can walk through it.
They keep the paper texture as well. Like when you look at the darker shades, they sort of have that like paper grain in them, which looks really cool.
Yeah.
I also noticed how like when the time of day changed in the real world, it impacted the world within the book.
Yes. Yeah, very, very nice effect.
And I really like how when they first sort of were hinting at where this was going to go, which you're going towards this tower, and there's this point where these boulders are tumbling down a cliff, and the characters remark that the boulders are disappearing. But what's really happening is that the boulders are reaching a point where they become like a realistic looking object, like a stone.
Yeah.
And, like, roll off out of the book pages. So they're really having a lot of fun here. And I love it. I'm really fascinated to see where this goes now.
The best bit, I think, honestly, it's almost like the magic of seeing, right, how does this 2D object, like a dice or whatever, look like in the 3D world, and as you take bits and bobs back and forth.
And I mean, that is kind of what it's designed to do, right? That is what makes it unique. And the question, of course, was how well it was going to be executed. And I think visually it's fantastic. Control-wise, it's surprisingly tight. I think it feels good to play. I bought that first power-up for the sword throwing, which feels fairly satisfying as well.
Fairly familiar as well.
That's kind of the key, is that it actually feels good to play, and the level design so far is pretty interesting. So sometimes you get like these gimmicky games that try to break the fourth wall, right? And it doesn't always work out. There was like Matt Hazard, if you remember that back in the day. That's what I was thinking of, how they had like a JRPG boss, and they tried to play with all these like ideas, which I thought was fun, but the game itself was not good at all. That's not the case here.
There's definitely an element of genre mixing, which I think we've seen in a couple of other games, not just genre mixing, but stylistic kind of changes by the level to match a story beat or match a gameplay beat. The games that come to mind, do you remember Braid?
No, I completely forgot about Braid.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
Don't go there. Jonathan Below will be on you.
I'm sorry, Jonathan.
Awesome game, obviously. Shame that it's been missing in the PlayStation Store, or it's hard to find. But anyway, Braid, yeah. So it's got a bit of that where you got to think kind of outside the box, and here you're literally jumping outside the storybook. Stuff like the stylistic flair of Comic Zone on Mega Drive, if you remember that.
Oh, yes, of course.
So, and What Remains of Edith Finch as well, where every kind of segment of the story there would change style. There'd be a comic book style and everything.
Oh, yeah. That was really fun.
It's a lot of fun to see a game not only take a different visual style, but then actually make that a gameplay mechanic. And I agree with what you're saying. It's not like it's trying to be a jack of all trades, master of none. It's the Plucky Squire is kind of nailing the mechanics of Zelda, kind of Mario. Those side-scrolling bits are a bit floaty and not quite as sharp.
I wouldn't say it plays like Mario. It actually made me think of Link's Awakening, how when they would have those side-scrolling bits. But that's only in 2D, and 2D doesn't feel like a tight platform game, but in 3D I actually think it does feel really good.
Yeah, there's even a stealth mission if you fancy it. They just worked that one in there. So
I guess there's really not much more to say on that, really. This is just a preview, early look at the game. I think we both wanted to highlight it just because it is such a delightful time. It's an impressive, beautiful, creative game, and I really hope it finds success, and I'm very eager to get my hands on it. I think it comes out in mid-September, like the 17th. So it's just around the corner as well. So perhaps then, if we have the time, because there's a lot of stuff coming out, we'll take a look at those console versions and see how they fare. I'm expecting some 60 FPS action minimum on PS5, Xbox. We'll see how the Switch fares. It's probably not going to be 60. But anyway, thanks for joining me here, Tom.
Absolutely. Anytime.
And hope you guys all enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.